Welcome to The Good Pod. Today's podcast is presented by Dr. Barry Napier. If you'd like more information, please visit our website, christiandoctrine.com.
The Free Will Fallacy. This podcast is a very simple outline of the argument, but it is essential to define the terms we use. By free will, I mean the classical term, or one of them at least. That is, knowing all possible outcomes for all known actions or beliefs, so that a balanced conclusion can be reached. Sadly, no man on earth has this capability. We don't know all possible outcomes to every possible action or belief, nor do we know all possibilities, so any conclusions we reach are flawed or at least only partially revealed. Christians who say they believe in free will, then, do not appear to understand this basic fact. It is obvious that human beings make choices and come to decisions, but these are not proof of free will. They only show a God-given ability to judge situations and thoughts. This ability is very restricted and is invariably affected by your emotions, knowledge, intelligence, plus many other variables. Therefore, when looking at the idea that man has free will, we must recognize these factors and realize that we only have partial will, but definitely not free will, even though we might come to our conclusions freely. And I use freely in its ordinary sense there. God is the only person to have free will, but even he does not use it fully. Why? Because, for example, though he can do whatever he wishes, he cannot sin. Thus, though he has the capability to do anything he wishes, he does not cross his own moral lines. There are many other examples. In Adam, the human will, though reflecting God's will, was not fully free, for he was commanded not to choose the fruit of a tree. His will was then partial and not free, especially as his will was created by God and was given boundaries. As with Christians, Adam was only able to choose wisely between variables allowed by God, and not all variables are known at any particular time. We may only choose from what we know, and what we know is very, very limited. This means we cannot come to a completely free conclusion, and so do not know every possible outcome. So, thinking of that, the following are points to remember. 1. Adam's will was functional, but definitely not free. That is, given our earlier definition. And he could choose between good and evil. 2. Before salvation, we had no free will, because our father was the devil and he forced us to do his bidding, whether extrovertly or introvertly. This is one reason why God says no unsaved man seeks after him in the biblical sense. 3. With salvation, we still have no free will, only a partial will determined by parameters set by God. We can certainly ignore these, but the penalty can be severe, proving that our ability to think clearly is not free. Salvation itself is not a human choice, but a gift of God, given by his command in eternity. Thus it cannot be sought after, nor rejected. 4. After salvation we can at last make choices, but within God's will. When we do not, we sin. This is another proof that we do not have free will, for no Christian willingly chooses sin and its penalties unless led by the sinful old man. When we choose within God's will, all is well, and our choices are good, because they are the Lord's choices, not our own. 5. In heaven, our will cannot be totally free, but will nevertheless be better. God will still rule and still expect us to act within his boundaries, not our own, and we will happily agree to it. And finally, 6, it is a corrupt human desire that demands we have free will, because unsaved human beings dislike the idea of God doing all the choosing. We like to think we can somehow contribute towards our salvation, so we reject vital truths such as election and predestination. As part of this rebellion, we resort to saying that God chooses us because of his foreknowledge. This, however, is a fallacy and a childish solution to a sinful dilemma. It is childish because the bad logic is that God knows we will receive him, and so he allows us to seek after him until we are saved. It is just a silly game invented by men. This totally obscures salvation itself, the sacrifice of Christ, and the very obvious fact of predestination. It also hates the notion that God actively rejects the majority, and so introduces the idea of choosing not to be saved. What nonsense! Now what does John 15:16 say? Ye have not chosen me, but I have chosen you, and ordained you, that you should go and bring forth fruit, and that your fruit should remain, that whatsoever ye shall ask of the Father in my name, he may give it to you. And in verse 19 of the same book we see this: If ye were of the world would love his own. But because ye are not of the world, but I have chosen you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. And in 2 Thessalonians 2:13, we read this: But we are bound to give thanks always to God for you, brethren beloved of the Lord, because God hath from the beginning chosen you to salvation through sanctification of the Spirit and belief of the truth. Now in 1 Peter 1:2 we also read this: Elect according to the foreknowledge of God the Father, through sanctification of the Spirit, unto obedience and sprinkling of the blood of Jesus Christ. Now this is nothing like the kids' game played by Arminians. It simply means that God knows in eternity who he elects to salvation. It does not mean he plays a game with human beings, pretending not to know who will seek salvation until they choose it for themselves. By ignoring these very basic facts, those who call themselves Christian prove themselves to be unsaved. And if saved, which I doubt, they must be very badly taught by corrupt teachers or are deliberately rebellious. God knows.